England, 1818. There were men who were frightened by war, men who feared scandal, and men whom mere loneliness shattered. But Declan Whitman, the Duke of Whitman, feared exposure. For as long as memory allowed, he lived by a single, isolating belief. Vulnerability is the crack through which ruin enters. IT shaped everything: his measured words, his controlled gestures, his absolute refusal to let emotion show through the armor of perfection he'd constructed. He was admired by society, envied by peers, impenetrably composed. Or so he liked to pretend. The morning his carriage rolled back onto Whitman lands after 6 disciplined months abroad, the estate air smelled of autumn leaves, wood smoke, and approaching rain. But peace, his most coveted possession, did not greet him at the door. A butler did, and in his gloved hand, a thick envelope bearing the Dowager Duchess's unmistakable elegant script. Declan took it with a heaviness that belonged more to fate than paper. He broke the seal with his thumb, exhaled as though pre-mourning whatever inconvenience awaited him, and read, Whitman House, the 3rd of October, 1818. My dearest Declan, I trust your 6-month absence has not entirely frozen your disposition. I imagine you are returning with your usual gravity, convinced that a controlled life is a safe life. But my dear boy, safety has never brought warmth into a house, nor a family into being. I write with excellent news. I have taken it upon myself out of love, of course, to arrange a modest gathering at Whitman House upon your return. Nothing ostentatious, merely a 5-night ball to reintroduce you properly to society. Before you furrow that perpetual line between your brows. Yes, Declan, I am perfectly aware you dislike such events, and yes, I know you find spontaneous emotion to be a dreadful lapse in judgment, but engage you must. I expect you to be gracious, attentive, and dare I say, warm. There will be many accomplished young ladies in attendance. You need not marry one of them. You need only see them, truly see them, as something more than a duty to be checked off your list. Furthermore, I have instructed Mrs. Halpert to ensure all preparations are completed before your arrival. The staff will handle the details. You must only appear, look handsome, and behave as though I have raised you with a heart, not merely a title. I shall be away for a short while longer, attending to business on the continent. But rest assured, my dear son, I will return in time to see you dance at least once without looking as though you're attending a funeral. Your devoted mother, Elizabeth, Dowager Duchess of Whitman. Declan read it twice, then a third time, as though repetition might soften the blow. 5 nights, a parade of eligible women. His mother's latest campaign to crack the fortress he had so carefully built around his life. He folded the letter with precise, controlled movements and handed it back to the butler. When does this gathering begin? Tomorrow evening, Your Grace. Tomorrow. Declan closed his eyes. Of course, his mother had timed this with surgical precision, leaving him no opportunity to object, no space to retreat. He would have to endure it, the dancing, the smiling, the performance of availability. But he would reveal nothing. He would maintain the facade. Vulnerability would not enter through any crack, because he would leave no cracks to exploit. He was certain of it. 20 miles south. Beaumont House, London. Lady Cassandra Beaumont stood in the portrait gallery of her family's townhouse, her charcoal moving swiftly across the page. Through the window, she could see a dowager yawning behind her fan during an afternoon call the authentic exhaustion beneath the painted smile society demanded. Perfect. Cassandra's fingers were stained with charcoal dust, her focus absolute. She captured the truth no one else bothered to notice. The boredom, the performance, the desperate fakery of it all. Too intense, they called her at every ball. Peculiar, unmarriageable. A marquis's daughter who preferred observation to flirtation, honesty to the careful performance of feminine accomplishment. She had no interest in the Duke of Whitman. From everything she'd heard, he was as cold and controlled as a marble statue, exactly the kind of man who represented everything suffocating about her world. But she had tremendous interest in what happened behind the facade of his five-night ball, which was why, 3 weeks prior, she had done something magnificently reckless. She had secured a temporary position at Whitman House. 5 nights only. A servant among servants. A temporary maid hired to assist with the grand event. She would use the name Miss Cassie, and no one, not her family, not society, certainly not the Duke himself, would know that a marquis's daughter was polishing his silver. Her sketchbook would finally capture the truth. Society as it truly was, unguarded and authentic, stripped of its performance. Cassandra smiled at her charcoal-stained fingers. Let the other ladies compete for the Duke's cold attention. She would be far too busy documenting the reality they all worked so desperately to hide. She had no idea that she was not the only aristocrat planning to go undercover. And she certainly had no idea that the woman she was about to meet in the servants' hall, a woman who would become her unlikely ally, her fierce protector, and ultimately the catalyst for everything that followed, was the very woman whose letter had just shattered the Duke's carefully controlled world. The same evening, a private inn, 12 miles from Whitman House. The Dowager Duchess Elizabeth Whitman studied her reflection in the small, cracked mirror. The gray dress was simple, plain, utterly unremarkable. The apron was starched and practical. The cap covered her distinctive hair. She looked exactly like what she intended to be. Invisible. Miss Mabel, she said aloud, testing the name. A widowed housekeeper's niece, hired temporarily to assist with the Duke's ball. Observant but humble. Useful but unnoticed. Perfect. Elizabeth had spent 6 months watching her son from afar, reading his letters, hearing reports from the estate steward, understanding with growing alarm that Declan was retreating further into his shell of perfection with every passing year. He would never choose a wife who challenged him. He would choose safety, control, a marriage as cold and flawless as everything else in his meticulously ordered life, unless someone intervened. And so the Dowager Duchess Elizabeth Whitman, a woman of considerable social power and even more considerable determination, had decided to do what no mother in England had likely ever done. She would infiltrate her own son's household. She would observe every young lady who attended his ball, not from the elevated position of a dowager duchess receiving carefully rehearsed curtsies, but from below, from a servants' hall, where the masks came off and true character revealed itself in how one treated those without power. And if she found a woman worthy of her son, a woman with warmth, with fire, with the courage to be genuine in a world of performance, Elizabeth would do everything in her power to ensure Declan saw her. Even if it meant deceiving everyone. Even if it meant deceiving Declan himself. Even if it meant risking everything. Elizabeth adjusted her cap one final time, picked up her small traveling case, and stepped out into the evening air. The game was about to begin, and by the end of the second night, 3 lives would be irrevocably changed, not by the careful plans of dutiful mothers or the calculated performances of society, but by the explosive, unpredictable force of 2 women refusing to accept the world as it was presented. 2 women who were about to meet. 2 women who had no idea they were both exactly where they didn't belong. The ball would begin tomorrow, and nothing, absolutely nothing would go as anyone planned. The servants' entrance to Whitman House smelled of lye soap and starch. Elizabeth descended the narrow stone steps with her traveling case, adopting the careful, deferential posture of a woman accustomed to service. Mrs. Halpert, the housekeeper, barely glanced up from her ledger. "Miss Mabel, is it? You're the extra pair of hands for the week." "Yes, ma'am. My late sister was in service here years ago. I'm grateful for the opportunity." Mrs. Halpert waved dismissively toward the servants' hall. Third door. You'll share quarters with the other temporary girl. Miss Cassie, I think her name was, arrived this morning. Both of you report at dawn for polishing duty. Elizabeth murmured her thanks and moved down the corridor, her heart hammering with the thrill of successful infiltration. She pushed open the door to find a young woman already inside, unpacking a small bag with movements far too refined for her station. Their eyes met. Cassandra froze, her posture betraying her immediately spine too straight, chin lifted in that unconscious way of women raised to command rooms, not clean them. She recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. Miss Mabel, I presume, Cassandra said carefully, her accent sliding toward the servant class vowels she'd been practicing for weeks. Elizabeth smiled, setting down her case. Miss Cassie, I believe. A long silence stretched between them. Then Cassandra's lips curved into something between resignation and amusement. You're not actually a maid, are you? I could ask you precisely the same question. Another pause. Then both women began to laugh quiet, conspiratorial, the sound of two aristocrats caught in their own deception. The afternoon sun slanted through the servants' corridor as Cassandra pressed herself into the shadowed alcove beneath the stairs, her charcoal moving swiftly across the page. Through the gap in the balustrade, she had a perfect view of Lady Pemberton in the drawing room above, the woman's carefully arranged expression of interest dissolving into a jaw-cracking yawn the moment she thought no one was watching. Cassandra smiled. Truth, finally. That's remarkably well observed. She spun, the sketchbook nearly tumbling from her hands. Elizabeth stood 3 feet away, a silver tray balanced on her hip, her expression unreadable. For a long moment, neither woman moved. Cassandra's mind raced through excuses, explanations, desperate appeals. But Elizabeth's gaze had already dropped to the sketch, studying it with the trained eye of someone who understood art. You've captured her perfectly, Elizabeth said quietly. The performance and the reality beneath it. Cassandra's grip tightened on the book. Are you going to report me? Report you for what? Having eyes. Elizabeth stepped closer, lowering her voice. I'm not your enemy, Miss Cassie. I'm here to observe as well, though my reasons are perhaps more maternal than artistic. Understanding flickered between them. 2 women operating in disguise, both seeking truth beneath society's polished surface. An alliance, then? Cassandra ventured. An alliance, Elizabeth confirmed. You keep my secret. I'll keep yours. Above them, the Duke's measured footsteps crossed the marble floor, steady and controlled despite the chaos of arriving guests and rustling preparations swirling around him. He paused briefly at the top of the stairs, as though sensing something amiss below, then continued on his predetermined path. Untouched, undisturbed, utterly alone, the ballroom glittered with candlelight and ambition. Lady Seraphina Vane held court near the orchestra, her ivory silk gown and calculated smile marking her as the evening's undisputed prize. She was precisely the kind of woman Declan would choose. Polished, predictable, perfectly appropriate, which was precisely why Elizabeth had to test her. She waited until the first dance concluded, then approached with a silver tray bearing a delicate handkerchief. The stitching was deliberately poor, uneven, amateurish, the kind of work a devoted servant might produce with limited skill but genuine affection. Begging your pardon, Lady Seraphina, Elizabeth murmured, eyes downcast. His Grace's mother commissioned this before her departure. She asked that it be presented to the lady who captured his attention first. I thought perhaps. This. Seraphina plucked the handkerchief between 2 fingers, her nose wrinkling in distaste. You thought to present this to me? It was made with great care, my lady. It's hideous. Seraphina's laugh was sharp, cruel. Did child stitch this? or perhaps someone who should have remained in the scullery. She tore the fabric deliberately, letting the pieces flutter to the floor. Tell the Dowager Duchess that if she wishes to honor me, she should employ servants with actual skill. Elizabeth bent to retrieve the pieces, her hands trembling, not with humiliation, but with cold, clarifying rage. From across the ballroom, Cassandra had witnessed everything. Their eyes met briefly, and she saw her own disgust mirrored in the older woman's face. Lady Seraphina Vane had just failed the most important test of her life, and she had no idea. The second night brought rain and Seraphina's patience to its breaking point. Declan had danced with her once, precisely once, his expression so perfectly neutral it bordered on insulting. She needed an outlet for her frustration, and she found it in the servants' corridor. Elizabeth had hung a small embroidered panel near the staff entrance, a landscape of Whitman House rendered in delicate silk thread, a piece she'd worked on during her supposed travels. It was ensigned, unassuming, beautiful. "How quaint," Seraphina announced loudly, drawing several guests to witness her performance. The servants fancy themselves artists now. She reached for the panel, her fingers curling to tear. "Don't!" Cassandra emerged from the shadows, her voice sharp with authority no maid should possess. "That work is exquisite. You have no right." "No right?" Seraphina laughed. "And what right does a servant have to address me?" "The right of any decent person witnessing cruelty." Seraphina lunged for the embroidery. Cassandra blocked her, and suddenly they were struggling, Elizabeth rushing forward to intervene. In the chaos, Seraphina's hand caught Elizabeth's apron, yanking hard. The fabric tore, and there, pinned to the simple gray dress beneath, gleamed the Whitman family crest, a distinctive sapphire brooch that every member of society would recognize instantly. The corridor went silent. Above them, on the landing, Declan stood frozen. His mother, dressed as a servant, and the fierce young maid defending her with a passion that cracked something deep in his chest, something he'd thought permanently sealed. The fortress walls were crumbling, and for the first time in his carefully controlled life, Declan had no idea what to do. The ball dissolved into whispered chaos. Elizabeth retreated to her chambers without explanation, leaving the guests to manufacture their own scandalous theories. Declan stood in his study, staring at nothing, feeling the carefully constructed architecture of his life collapse around him. His mother had deceived him. For days, she had observed him from below, watching him perform his hollow rituals of perfection while she scrubbed floors and polished silver. The humiliation should have been unbearable, but it wasn't humiliation that haunted him. It was the girl, the fierce young woman who had thrown herself between his mother and cruelty without hesitation, her eyes blazing with an honesty so raw it had struck him like a physical blow. That passion, that reckless, unguarded passion, had exposed something in him he'd spent years burying. He found himself watching for her. When she carried linens through the corridor, her movements still too graceful for her role. When she paused by the library window, her gaze distant and hungry, as though memorizing something invisible. When she smiled at the scullery maid with genuine warmth, not the calculated politeness of society, but real human connection. Vulnerability is the crack through which ruin enters. The belief that had governed his entire life now felt like a prison sentence. Because watching Cassandra, Lady Cassandra, he learned from quietly questioning the staff, Declan began to suspect something terrifying. Perhaps vulnerability wasn't the crack through which ruin entered. Perhaps it was the crack through which life did. And he had been dead for far too long. Cassandra fled Whitman House before dawn, her small bag clutched in trembling hands. She had exposed herself, broken her disguise, involved herself in aristocratic drama that was none of her concern. Her father would be furious. Society would whisper. Her brief taste of honest observation had cost her everything. She spent a week confined to Beaumont House, avoiding her mother's pointed questions and her father's disappointed silence. Her sketchbook remained closed. What was the point of capturing truth when truth itself had become her undoing? The letter arrived on the 8th day. Cassandra stared at the Whitman seal, her heart hammering as she broke it open with unsteady fingers. Lady Cassandra Beaumont, I write not as a dowager duchess humiliated, but as a mother grateful. Your defense of a woman you believe to be a simple servant revealed a character I have spent years searching for. One that values human dignity over social hierarchy, honesty over performance. My deception was calculated. Yours, I suspect, was born of genuine curiosity and a hunger for truth that this suffocating world rarely permits young women to satisfy. I would be honored if you would return to Whitman House, not as a servant, but as my personal companion. There are matters we must discuss. And there is someone who, I believe, needs very much to meet the real you. Your presence is requested at your earliest convenience. With sincere admiration, Elizabeth, Dowager Duchess of Whitman. Cassandra read it 3 times, her hands shaking. The drawing room felt different as a guest. Cassandra sat across from Elizabeth, wearing her own lavender silk gown instead of coarse gray wool, tea balanced delicately in her hand instead of a polishing rag. My son, Elizabeth said quietly, has built his entire life around the belief that vulnerability destroys. He needs someone who will prove him catastrophically wrong. You want me to challenge him? I want you to be yourself. That alone will be sufficient. The door opened. Declan entered, clearly expecting to find his mother alone, and stopped dead. Cassandra, not Miss Cassie in servant's garb, but Lady Cassandra Beaumont in afternoon dress, her posture commanding, her gaze direct and unflinching. The transformation was devastating. Your Grace, she said, setting down her teacup with deliberate calm. How convenient. I've been hoping to speak with you. His control slipped. Lady Cassandra, I didn't realize that the maid who defended your mother was a marquis's daughter. She stood, closing the distance between them. Tell me, Your Grace, does that change what you saw? Does my title make my passion more acceptable? Or does it simply make it more complicated? I don't, he struggled, his perfect composure fracturing. I don't know what you want me to say. The truth. Her voice softened, but her eyes remained fierce. When was the last time you said anything true? When was the last time you felt anything without immediately burying it beneath that impenetrable calm? The silence stretched. Then, barely audible, I don't remember. That, Cassandra said gently, is the loneliest thing I've ever heard. And Declan, for the first time in years, couldn't hide behind his facade. Elizabeth orchestrated everything. Walks through the garden at twilight, chance meetings in the library, dinners where conversation turned philosophical. Cassandra and Declan circled each other like cautious dancers, debating perfection and passion, control and chaos, the price of safety versus the cost of feeling nothing at all. He was falling. He knew it, and it terrified him. So when Lady Seraphina began spreading whispers about Cassandra's extended stay, questioning the propriety of an unmarried woman residing at Whitman House, Declan did what he always did. He retreated. He kept their growing connection private, hidden, controlled. He thought he was protecting her. Cassandra found him in the study 3 days later, her face pale with fury. "You're doing it again," she said, her voice shaking. "Hiding. Controlling. Lady Pemberton just asked my father if our friendship was appropriate. Do you understand what you've done? By keeping a secret, you've made us scandalous. I was trying to protect. You were trying to protect yourself." She stepped closer, tears threatening. "You're so afraid of exposure that you'd rather let my reputation burn than acknowledge that you might actually feel something for me. The words hit like blows. Declan stood frozen, watching everything he'd tried to control spiral away from him. "I'm terrified," he finally said, the admission breaking something fundamental inside him. "I'm terrified that if I let you close, if I admit what I feel, I'll lose everything." "But Cassandra," his voice cracked, "I've already lost everything. Because I'm losing you." She waited, silent, demanding more. "I love you," he whispered, "and I don't know how to do this without control." Declan rode to Beaumont House without his carriage, without his valet, without any of the careful preparations that had governed his life for so long. He arrived wind-blown and improper, his cravat askew, his composure shattered. The Marquis intercepted him in the foyer. Declan bowed, apologized for the intrusion, and then, in front of 3 scandalized footmen, asked if he might speak with Lady Cassandra in the garden. Alone. Immediately. It was outrageous. It was improper. It was magnificently uncontrolled. The Marquis, wisely, stepped aside. Cassandra was sketching by the fountain when he found her. She looked up, startled by his disheveled appearance, and something flickered in her eyes. Hope, perhaps, or fear. "I came to tell you," Declan said, breathless, "that you were right. About everything. Declan, I don't want a dutiful duchess. I don't want perfection or poise or any of the safe, controlled things I thought I needed." He knelt on the garden path, heedless of the dirt staining his trousers. "I want the woman who defended a maid she barely knew. The woman who sketches truth instead of prettiness. The exposing fire that disturbed my carefully ordered world and forced me to face what I've been hiding from." Which was, her voice was barely a whisper, that I was already ruined, that I'd built a fortress around nothing. That vulnerability isn't the crack through which ruin enters. It's the only thing that makes life worth living. He pulled a ring from his pocket, his grandmother's, simple and honest. "Marry me, not the Duke. Me, the man who's terrified and imperfect and desperately, hopelessly in love with you." Cassandra smiled through tears. Yes, and finally, Declan learned to breathe. Thank you for watching this video to the end. I know you enjoyed it. And if you want to enjoy more beautiful stories like this, please like and subscribe to this channel. Thank you for your support. See you on the next one.